Okay, so now I would like to introduce the moderator for tonight's event. Cami Ostman, founder of the Narrative Project, has published a memoir, Second Wind, One Woman's Midlife Quest to Run 7 Marathons on 7 Continents. And she's co-edited several anthologies, including Beyond Belief, The Secret Lives of Women in Extreme Religions, and also True Stories, volumes 1 through 3 with the Narrative Project. She's been profiled in Fitness Magazine, and her books have been reviewed in O Magazine, The Atlantic, and The Washington Post. So welcome, Cami. Thanks for coming tonight. And now for our featured author. Rachel Michelberg grew up in San Francisco Bay Area and still enjoys living there. She earned her Bachelor of Music degree in vocal performance from San Jose State University and has performed leading roles in musicals and opera from Carmen to My Fair Lady, as well as the part of the Mother Abbess in The Sound of Music 3 times. When Rachel isn't working with one of her 20 voice and piano students, she loves gardening, hiking, and making her own bone broth. She and Cami are here to talk about her new memoir, this one right here, Crash, How I Became a Reluctant Caregiver. Please welcome Rachel Michelberg and Cami Ostman.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you. Yeah. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Cami.
I'm so excited to be able to interview you about this amazing, interesting book. Interesting, fascinating, troubling, thought-provoking book that you wrote, Crash. And also we've gotten to know each other over the last months, and so I'm especially happy to be able to be here with you. So thank you for inviting me.
Oh, so thrilled to have you be my interviewer.
Yeah, it's good. Well, and I was thinking when Claire was introducing you, and she said all of these beautiful things about your performances. And I was thinking, I'm so glad Rachel wasn't at my family party over the weekend where I badly sang I Will Survive in karaoke.
I would have been very forgiving, I'm sure.
I know you would have been supportive. That's great. Well, so I just wanted to start out with having you to give us a little summary of the story, because I don't want to assume that since it's newly out, I'm assuming most people have not read it. And so if you can give us a little summary of the story, give away as much or as little as you want to about the conclusion. And I want to remind people to ask questions in the Q&A, because I think there will be questions that come up as we talk about the story and about you. So yeah, give us a summary.
Right. So I had been married to my first husband, David, for about almost 10 years, and we had 2 children, ages 6 and 7, when he was involved in a small plane crash, which he survived, which in and of itself is kind of unusual. But he did sustain a very, very severe traumatic brain injury. What happened was I was suddenly, like from one moment to the next, I became his caregiver, needing to make all the decisions about his medical care, about all the therapies. And I mean, at first he was, on a ventilator and in a coma and not even conscious, but it was, the story is really grounded in the dilemma that I faced in. At first I didn't think that it was a dilemma. I thought that I would take care of him. That was my job as a wife. I had made that promise. Yet at the same time, our marriage had been on very shaky ground when the accident happened. I was not happy. I had become interested in someone else. And so that further complicated the situation in that it just felt like such a burden to me. And so with the story is my journey toward coming to a decision about whether or not I would assume that role permanently of being his caregiver. And I want to be clear that he was not a vegetable. He, in that sense of the word, he was able to walk and talk and swallow and do the survival things necessary. But it was a frontal lobe injury, which controls it controls impulse, it controls emotion, it controls it filters. You know, we don't realize how our brains are like, they're like big computers, you know, and sorry to use that analogy, but it's true. I mean, it makes connections all the time, right? And essentially the connections were just smashed right in the middle there. And so he needed to be cared for 24/7 and supervised. And he was physically, there were lots and lots of issues going on as well. There were destroyed vertebrae in his back. He had internal injuries. There were seizures. There was incontinence. It would have been more than a full-time job. And so the story is really an exploration of obligation. What are our obligations to each other? What is our duty? When is it okay to say no? To say, I can't do this for whatever reason, and what are the repercussions of that decision going to be with the community, with family, when those expectations are not met?
Right. Yeah, and this is it's a really honest book. You know, one thing that really struck me is your narrator is hard on herself, you know, and which I'm sure reflects your experience of being hard on yourself. I'm sure it's not just a voice that you know, crafted for the page, that it really represents the truth of the experience. I feel like it's an honest book where we just really get to see inside the eyes and the heart, you know, inside the mind and the heart of this narrator. And you didn't hold anything back, really. And what I think is interesting about that is that because I know that you got a lot of criticism for the way that you handled things, or some of the decisions that happened that you made along the way. I think it's interesting you dealt with the inner critic on the page too, you know. And I don't really have a question about that, but just to like reflect it, like, you know.
No, I mean, that was such a crucial part of the story, was my guilt and my feeling that at first it was that I had no choice, and then dealing with the feelings that came up around, okay, well, now I have to do this thing.
Right.
But then, of course, with the decision, with as I moved closer and closer to the decision of saying, I don't think I can do this, the sense of shame and of guilt around that, and needing to stay in my truth,
Right.
which was that wasn't a role that I felt that I could
Right.
explore. And you know, I had, during that time, especially the first few months, I was looking for books. Where did we turn? I was looking for books about this similar situation, and I found a few, actually some fiction, but a memoir about a woman whose husband had a very severe traumatic brain injury. But her story was that she rose to the occasion, that she felt, she resented it, and all the feelings I had, but she just worked toward making it work somehow for their family. That wasn't my story.
Right.
I wasn't the hero. I kind of think of myself as an anti-hero in a way, although maybe not in the conventional sense of that word, but
Right.
but I needed to live my truth, and so that's why I wanted to write it.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, when we get married, whether you have it in your vows or not, you know, we have this for better or for worse. And, you know, it may have been, who knows what would have unfolded between you and David had the accident not. We never get to know. That's the one thing, right? We never get to know what would have unfolded. But once the accident happened, and then you needed to make some decisions for your own life. And I know that you got a ton of heat from a lot of different directions. So I wonder if you can just talk a little bit about what it's like to be the target of some pretty brutal and mean criticism.
Yeah. So the one of the characters in my story, a main character, is David's sister. David was born and raised in Germany, in Munich, Germany, and his sister moved to Israel. And his sister, who's very much a caregiving type of person, that's her nature, she became very involved in helping me at first with all the decisions and just being there for me and my kids and for him. And then as I moved more and more toward this decision to reject that role of caregiver, her name is Dora, his sister. She became more desperate because she felt that David needed to be if he wasn't going to be at home, then he needed to be with her in Israel. And so she started, and it was well-intentioned, but she started getting help from people in the community in Germany where David grew up. And one of she actually brought a couple of people back to the States to help her work the legal system, work with the social worker to try to get me to do things differently. And one of the people that she brought was a woman named Gabrielle, or Gabi. And I had met Gabi years before in Germany. She was very free spirit, she's an artist, very outspoken. And so this scene is when Dora is bringing Gabi over to our house. And I was actually happy that I thought it was nice because Dora was going to have some company, and I liked Gabi. And so I thought it was just nice that Gabi's coming. And so I'm happy when I hear that Gabi will be coming with Dora on this visit. Gabi's lively eccentricity will cheer David up and keep Dora company during her stay. David's long-term memory is somewhat intact. They can relive Munich memories. Gabi will be a great buffer between Dora and me. We're still on speaking terms, though the tension between us is increasingly intolerable. I invite them to Shabbat dinner the day after they arrive. Shabbat is the Sabbath. My shmoofy is all grown up, Gabi shrieks as Hannah opens the door. Hannah recoils, but Gabi sweeps in and enfolds her in a great hug. She spots Joshi over Hannah's shoulder. And who's this, der kleiner David, little David? Oh, you look just like your papa when he was your age. We light the candles, sing the blessings, pass around the challah I'd picked up at Noah's Bagels that morning. After dinner, the kids are excused and run off to watch something inane on the Disney Channel. That's So Raven, Hannah Montana, or The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. Fantasy worlds where all the kids are witty, the adults are stupid, and every problem is resolved in half an hour. Dora, Gabi, and I linger over coffee and ice cream. I'm eager to hear about Gabi's artistic endeavors of the past 7 years. She's continued to show her work in galleries all over Europe, successfully supporting herself. This time I'm more impressed than jealous. Gabi puts down her coffee cup. I've been talking to David every day. You know he's miserable. She speaks matter-of-factly. I glance at Dora. She doesn't meet my gaze. Here we go. I haven't been avoiding the topic, not really, but I'm not about to bring it up. Gabi folds her napkin with intense deliberateness. He wants to leave. He hates it there. Do you know they won't let him smoke, even in his own room, or leave if he wants to, and that they force him to do these childish exercise classes? Hold on, I interrupt, feebly. I haven't begun to prepare my defense. I know it's not the best situation, but it's only temporary until the lawsuit is settled. Beads of sweat are forming on my hairline. Instinctively, I glance toward the TV room, grateful that Hannah Montana is drowning out the impending attack. Dora stirs her half-melted ice cream. It's torture for him, Gabi continues. Do you know how smart David is? He says that all the other inmates, that's what he calls them, inmates, are all idiots. He has no one to talk to. He's surrounded by lunatics. Later, I'll remember how calculated her tone, how manipulative her manner. But at that moment, I run my hand through my hair, sip my lukewarm coffee. It matters to me that she knows I'm not evil or entirely selfish. I still want her to understand. Gabi leans forward, her dark eyes accusing. How could you do this? How can you lock him away? She settles back in her chair, contented. What kind of a wife does this to her husband? What the fuck? Who is she to tell me how to live my life, make my decisions? This is my dinner table, my house, my husband. Suddenly, I don't give a shit how far she's traveled, how gorgeous her photographs, how good her intentions. I speak quietly. I think you need to leave. I'm surprised, but I take courage from speaking my truth. With years of vocal training, I know how to project my voice, command an audience of hundreds. I access my crescendo. You need to leave. I don't have to take this. Undaunted, Gabi continues her calm, deliberate tirade. All of David's friends are disgusted with you. Do you like being a jailer? Are you in love with having so much power? I stand up. You need to leave now. I won't be treated this way in my own home. You're no longer welcome here. Poor Dora looks miserable. Screw that. Damn her for putting me in this position. I will not turn into the bitch they think I already am.
Wow, such a powerful scene, Rachel.
You know, I'd never thrown anyone out of my house before,
Yeah.
but I think I discovered a lot of strength during those years, as hard as it was. I wasn't always conscious of it, of the strength that I was gathering, but I had to, you know, otherwise the other choices were not acceptable. I mean, I had to stay strong for my kids, right? And so it gave me strength to actually stay strong for myself.
Right.
It gave me permission, I should say.
I love that, excuse me, that moment where you said, you know, I still want her to understand. Like, I feel like one of the things that's so powerful about this book is that there are some universal takeaways, you know, and for me as a woman, you know, there have been times, of course, you know, for all of us, whether we're women or not, but there have been times when someone has been being unkind and I still wanted them, or judgmental, wanted them to understand me. Like, what is it inside of us that's just always craving that approval, even when the person is A, clearly not going to deliver it to us, and B, you know, they're judgmental and unkind and sometimes rude, and yet we still want that. And in this scene, we just see this shift, right? You know, where, and I'm sure that it wasn't permanent. You know, my question is really, do you still struggle with that? You know, that moment of like, I still want them to understand me. But in that moment, you shifted.
Yeah, I think it's so deeply ingrained, particularly as women, to be nice, to not be a bitch, right? Because it's usually black and white. It's like either you're the nice one who like does what you're supposed to, or you're the, you know, the B word. And so I still struggle with that. I think much less, and I certainly, you know, I will have nothing to do with her for sure. I've learned how to erect the boundaries against toxic people.
Yeah.
And that's a very powerful skill.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the book is all about boundaries, about discovering your own boundaries and standing true to them, even when they're not popular, even when, you know, there are consequences to them.
Right.
You mentioned the black and white piece, you know, and another thing that I really appreciate is that there isn't a black and white, and you're exploring this question of this is true and that's true in a lot of with several themes. And one of the themes that I was really struck by is the theme of grief. And I mean, obviously there's grief when somebody loses their capacity, and, you know, the grief of, you know, of who he won't ever be again. But I was really struck by, like, the grief is complicated because the marriage wasn't in great shape when this happened. And yet you would never wish this on someone. And then there's all these decisions that you have to make. And the narrator makes the decisions as she's aware that she needs to, and yet still really grieves. And, you must have asked yourself, do I have the right to feel sad about this? Or, so to talk a little bit about that, the complexity of grieving when some of the reasons that you're grieving are your own choices.
Oh, clearly. I like that you said it was their universal themes, because loss is loss. And whether it's because of something dramatic and tragic like this, or something more common, like a divorce, that's still a loss, because it's a loss of a relationship that must have been, there were wonderful things about it at one point, or else it wouldn't have been a relationship, and so there were these, of course, there were these moments, there were these moments, particularly around the kids, but memories we had shared together, or that came up. The thing for me that made it a little bit different is that, or maybe a lot different, is that David became a different person. He really became like a child. And so it wasn't like I was missing what he was at times. I wasn't missing what could have been, if that makes any sense. And we're part of what was so hard was the suddenness of it.
Right.
And that with parents, we know that at some point our parents are probably going to need care, right? They're going to develop Alzheimer's, or there's going to be a stroke, or they're going to be physically unable to climb stairs, or whatever it is. They're going to need care. And so I think most of us prepare for that, whether it's conscious or subconscious. But you don't prepare for something like this, right? But my greatest, I think I'm straying a little bit from what you were talking about.
Yeah.
But I wanted him to have dignity.
Mm-hmm.
That was my greatest goal for him, and I wasn't always sure what that would look like as far as what his living situation would be, but I did have a lot of grief that cropped up periodically, and it would surprise me sometimes, especially around the loss of the kids having a father.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's something that you write about in the book. You have, the kids are very present. In fact, we'll talk more about the kids when we talk about the writing of the book. But I think you have a scene to read for us where it sort of illustrates the grief around the kids in particular.
I do, and I just had a, there it is. I just had a bookmark in it, which I took out. So this is a much shorter scene, but this is shortly after the accident. It's about maybe 7 weeks after. And my daughter was in a gymnastics show. Lisa and Gordon, by the way, are my sister and brother-in-law. At Hannah's gymnastics show, I comprehend the extent of our loss at an infinitely deeper level. Lisa and Gordon meet Joshie and me at the gym. They've been there actively for us, visiting David, driving kids, running errands. Gordon makes a point of playing with Joshie, ping pong, trips to the ice cream store, swimming. Their son Aaron on the competitive gymnastics team is also performing, but they come to the show mostly for Hannah and for me. From the bleachers, I gaze down on the leotard-clad 6- and 7-year-olds, performing their newfound skills. All around, cameras flash, camcorders whir, hundreds of proud dads. I'm not prepared for the wallop of sadness. I pull Joshie onto my lap and bury my wet face in his golden curls. He and his sister will never have that again. There will never be anyone except me to quell, to burst with pride at their smallest accomplishment, their most rudimentary somersault, or balancing on a beam 6 inches from the floor. I see Gordon and Lisa smiling and applauding when Hannah executes a perfectly awkward cartwheel. They will be there for her and for Joshie, but it's not the same. It's all up to me now. The cheering, the scolding, the quelling, the loving, the teaching, along with cleaning up the messes, taking out the garbage. The hopes and dreams that only parents can have for their children. The disappointments, mine alone. I'm a single parent. I knew it before, but now it's real, achingly real. Joshy squirms from my grasp and asks for water. I watch him drink from the plastic bottle, thinking, I can't do this.
Yeah. Yeah, I can feel that one. That's the loss is one thing to manage your own loss. It's another to feel it for your children, right? Yeah.
And also, to have that partner to commiserate with, right?
Right.
To enjoy their accomplishments and deal with their needs and failures and
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, even divorced parents, they share those kids in common, and right. Absolutely. I just want to remind people that if they have questions for Rachel, that they can pop them in the Q&A box down below. And also that, because I know what you are all thinking now, you really want to read the book, and you're right. So you want to make sure that that you purchase it, and Claire will pop in at the end and put the link for how you can buy the book, a signed copy even, in the chat. So Rachel, thank you for both of those scenes. Is it okay if we just shift gears and talk a little bit about the writing journey? Because it was quite a journey. You started this book like 11 years ago, not too long after, after the accident, and then you just published it. And so, what took you so long?
Crazy. Such a great, it was actually 13 years ago, because I've been publishing process took about 2 years. I wasn't a writer. I didn't know anything about it, really, except what I'd learned in, 8th grade, 9th grade English. I mean, I was always comfortable with writing, but I had no skills. I had no skills. Really. I was an avid reader, which helped a lot because I knew good writing when I saw it, and I knew what I liked. But I had to learn how. So I started by taking classes. I took, general writing class, and then I took a memoir class. And then I also knew that the subject was so difficult. I mentioned at the beginning that I had developed feelings for someone else, and that was actually part of it. As I was really moving toward having an affair, and I knew that there was no way that my kids could read about that or know about that until they were old enough to understand and process it. And so it was kind of always in the back of my mind that I had lots of time, because at the time I started, they were, 9, 10 years old, something like that. So that was part of why it took me so long. The other part was I was a single parent. I had a full-time job, working. I was dealing with still dealing, although I really started writing when David moved to Israel with his sister. I just, there was another part of it too, which is important, I think I want to talk about, which is that I stopped cold for 2 years I just stopped because I attended a conference where some industry professionals, some publishing industry professionals had talked to us, and they were so discouraging. And this was before the pandemic. This was, like 6 years ago, maybe. And I just left there feeling just absolutely like, who do I think? I can't, this is crazy. I can't, no one's going to be interested in publishing this. This is, which is very sad. It was very sad. And several of the other participants at the conference said the same thing. Right. But the book wouldn't leave me alone. It said, look, just finish me. Don't worry about publishing. Just finish me.
Yeah.
And I knew, and it was eating at me. So I did. I finished it. It took me another year and a half or so.
Yeah. I love that. I want to say, first of all, you and I have talked about that conference that you went to, and, and I had my moment of like, why do they do that to people, like rage over don't discourage, because
Well, I
why?
think the intention was just to reality check, but what we all felt was discouraged, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
And so, and it was hard. I mean, I wanted to get things right. I want, and so because I'm an actor, I feel like the scenes popped out to me, like the scene at the gymnastics show, and the scene with Gabi, and there's several. I do a lot of scene work in my book, and dialogue, because I'm sort of comfortable with that. But then I had to figure out how to link them all, and not be like, and then Monday we did this, and then Tuesday we did that, but to really move forward through time in a way that wasn't disjointed and wasn't jarring for the reader.
Right. And to figure out what the themes really are that you want to cover, because you could have oriented this entire book around the legal system and how hard it is to manage dealing with the legal system. That could have been the focus of the entire book, instead of the examination of the themes that you examine. So that's another piece of it too. It's like, what am I saying, and why am I saying it? What am I exploring?
Yeah, well, one of the things I learned, I'd never heard the term narrative threads before, and I had to learn. And for those of you that don't know, it's maybe Cami, you should define it.
Well, I think, here's how I think of it. I think of what we talk about as the guiding question. And so we have writers in the Narrative Project craft a guiding question. And so everything that you put in the book is connected to that guiding question in some way, shape, or form. So if the question is, how do you make a decision? How do you make a difficult decision? Let's say, then every scene is part of exploring that, or answering it, or wondering about it, or not answering it, or struggling with it. So I think of that guiding question as the thread that runs through, all of the book.
Right.
And
It's
things
often
are
more than one.
connected. Yeah,
There can be more than one, right? So
absolutely, yes.
yeah, and then in fact, I was just talking to our friend Lisa about this today, having symbols in the book that repeat.
Right.
Like I begin with talking about a diamond necklace, and then I bring that up later, and it represents my loss and my so these were tricks I learned, and not just tricks, but devices that are actually really important to learn. And then so that's pretty much why it took me so long. And also because I didn't feel a sense of urgency, you know um and so I just kept giving myself permission to, like, if I felt like I needed a break from it, because it was also very intense. And
Yeah.
my original intention was, people ask, oh, did you write the book because you needed to process your feelings? That wasn't it originally. I just felt like I had this story that kind of was crazier than truth.
Yeah.
By the way, people, there's more. There's more. I was stalked. There's an eating disorder in there. There's cancer. There's other stuff. And so it felt like, I think I have a story.
Yeah, there were a lot of dramatic things that happened, and the question was just, how did they tie together? And we talk a lot about dropping breadcrumbs. For the reader, you drop a breadcrumb in chapter 2 that you're going to come back to. You do that very, very nicely in this book. You circle back around to those, what you were talking about, those symbols that repeat throughout. I call them breadcrumbs. You drop one here, and if you drop a breadcrumb, you got to go back and pick it up at some point, right?
Right.
And you do, yeah, you do that. And I can't think of anything that isn't tied up, or at least, I'm left like, well, what about at the end? So nicely done with tying up all those loose ends and
Thank you.
circling back. Yeah.
Thank you.
Um, and the diamond, you start with it and you end with it. I mean, that's very interesting.
Yeah, and it wasn't the opening scene ever until almost like just before I finished the draft. And I just kept thinking about Cheryl Strayed in Wild, how she starts with her boot falling down the mountain, and and that's in the middle. It's kind of in the, or maybe even toward the end of the
Yeah.
story. I thought. And that was such a fantastic, it just brings you in. It's like, well, how did she get there? And how did she get out of it? And it's like a hook, right? And
Right.
that was something I needed to learn. Like, and it really was kind of a last minute, let's start with this instead of.
Right. Yeah. And then, I mean, the other thing, you alluded to this, but the kids were young, and sometimes when you're in the middle of writing a memoir in particular, you don't always know what everything is going to mean because you're still living it, so sometimes, even though, there is a story there, a very dramatic story, stalking and all kinds of, page turner sorts of things. But what it means might not be delivered to you until something happens, several years down the road. So, yeah. So I'm curious, what would you say to other writers who, I wanted to back up to something else that you said about, I knew I had a story, and how it seems to me, but you weren't a writer. And I love that you said that. Because I think for some people, they've always wanted to be a writer. Like, that's been their lifelong craving since they were like little, and then there's other people, a story occurs to them and they just have to write that story. Sometimes that's what leads the way. And for you, that was it, right? It was like, not that you'd been you were already an artist, but you weren't longing to be a writer per se, but the story was bugging you, it was picking at you, it was nagging you. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
So my curiosity is, say that again.
Oh, that's why I started to write it. It really wasn't any like, oh, I want to be published, and that came later.
Yeah, right. And so just a reminder to people that if you have questions about the writing journey or the book itself, to pop those in the Q&A box down at the bottom of the screen. And so, Rachel, I'm curious what you would say to other writers who, because I'm looking at the list of who's on now, and there's a lot of writers and watching us, and some of them have been at their books for a dang long time, and so I'm curious what you would say to them. What's your advice? What's your wisdom?
Stick with it. Everybody has a different process. My process was 11 years. And if you feel like you need some, like, obviously, if they know you, they know about the Narrative Project, and they know about your courses and your support systems. Keep getting those support systems, keep getting ways to feel accountable. One of the ways that I felt accountable to produce pages was, well, I signed up for retreats and these retreats where I wasn't distracted with other things. And, when I came back after the 2-year pause, I just felt like I needed more one-on-one support. So I actually hired an editor then. I hired my editor before my first draft was finished. And I would send him chapters. And that helped me finish.
Yeah.
Because he was waiting for those pages. He was waiting for those chapters. And he was also working with the work I'd already done.
Right.
And so he was able to help me sort of structure where I was going. And so that helped me a great deal. He said, usually people send me finished work or send me a completed draft that he has to work with. So he said, your process has been different, but it's exactly what I needed to finish.
Yeah, right. He served as a coach and an editor.
Yeah, he was basically a coach and then an editor. Yeah.
Is that David Colin Carr?
It is. It is.
You thanked him in your acknowledgements.
I did,
And yeah, I saw him in your first interview. He was lovely and so glowingly proud of you, just like off the charts, shiny proud. So yeah, there's having edited a lot of books myself, there is really nothing like watching somebody bring it to completion and knowing that you were there, supporting and holding and pushing and nudging and,
Well, it's the joy I get being a voice teacher and watching my students on stage and knowing where they started, and then, and I fell too.
yeah.
I threw a lot of Yiddish in my book. I hope that, I don't know.
Comment on that before, like, yeah, oh, I learned a lot of Yiddish. That's great. I want to ask about publishing because you said it earlier, never mind publishing. I have to write this story. And I think there can be kind of a tension in that, right? Like as you're writing, if you have nobody looking over your shoulder, you might not write. If you think, oh, it doesn't matter whether or not I'll ever get it out into the world. But on the other hand, you don't want to have heavy criticism or other people looking over your shoulder so that you're not able to be honest. And somehow you struck that balance and then decided, I am going to publish this book. So why? Why was it important not just to write it, but to actually publish it and get it out in the world?
So it started out because my identity had been changing for a while from being a singer and performer, where I was getting a lot of attention and accolades and eyeballs on me, and and it's what we artists need, right? And as I got older and those kinds of opportunities got fewer and fewer, that's the truth. It's true in Hollywood, it's true. And I started feeling like I wasn't relevant in the world. Mm-hmm. And so that was and that's a really honest confession, that it really was about feeling like I needed my voice, in this case, my writing voice as opposed to my actual singing voice, to still be heard.
Yeah.
And that is still true, to be true confessions. And at the same time, overlapping that reason for wanting to publish was one of the questions that kept coming up in these writing retreats and classes that I was in was, what is your message? What is your core message? Who is going to want to read your book? Because that's important when you're writing. The voice needs to be talking to those people. I'm not talking to 20-year-olds. I'm talking to, although I hope they enjoy it and read it, I'm talking to women our age, 30 to or 40 to 80 who become caregivers, and men, and I'm like, who's gonna, my situation was so unusual, and they're like, no, it isn't. Caregivers, everybody knows someone who's a caregiver or is going to become one or has been one or is one, And so I felt like I had a message for them. And I felt like that was an important message. It's okay. It's not just okay, but it's crucial for you to consider your options, to not do it because you think you're supposed to.
Right.
But to consider your options and give yourself permission to not think of yourself as a monster if you decide against it. I just thought that was a really important message to communicate.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are the reasons.
Yeah. I often say that I believe that writing and publishing a memoir is a profoundly generous journey. It's not one act. Let's be clear. It's like a lot of time with your butt in the chair and then going back to the butt in the chair and back and back and back. But that it is very generous because you not only write out what happened, but then you start to, you oblige yourself to ask questions of your life over and over and over again, and how the life that you've lived and that you're writing about might benefit someone else. That doesn't happen usually early in the writing where the catharsis is happening, where you're just getting it on the page. But later on in the revision journey, it does, doesn't it? You ask, who's going to be holding this on an airplane, and what do I want? What's the gift that I want them to have? What do I wish someone had given me?
Exactly.
Yeah. That's so beautiful. Thank you for publishing it. And you chose to go the route of She Writes Press, which is a hybrid publisher. Did you shop it, or did you just go straight to?
I shopped it just a little bit. My editor is older. He encouraged me to go the traditional route. So, but for those of you that don't know, the traditional route is you have to compose what's called a query letter, which is kind of like a job application. I don't know. It's there's an art to it, and then you have to send that out to agents who are taking your genre. So only agents that are interested in memoir, and there are not as many of them. And you have to find out who they are and send them your letter and all of that, and then wait for the rejections to come in. And I did a few of those, and I got a few rejections, and then I learned about She Writes Press, and I thought I'm just going to submit it to them. And there was a fee, a small fee, like $30 or something. And they don't, and She Writes doesn't, a lot of hybrid presses don't take everything that you submit to them. By the way, hybrid, everyone, is when the author pays a certain amount up front. It's somewhere usually under $10,000, and it's kind of more of a partnership. It's almost like you're investing in your own business of your book. And so when She Writes accepted my manuscript, it just felt like the right thing to do. I felt like this is a sure thing. I don't want to be on tenterhooks for the next several months and sending out letters, and I just decided I'm just going to go this route.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm so thrilled that the publishing industry is changing, because it used to be you could only had to be one of the big five. Now it's the big three or something.
Right.
And there are so many more opportunities. There's so many more avenues to publishing than just traditional one I talked.
So many, and and it really strikes me as being really consistent with the journey of being true to your own decision making process. I mean, you get to own the process a little more, well, a lot more, and true, there's an output from financial output to do it, but you also, I mean, look at this cover. It's so gorgeous. I don't know I'm sure we would have had an amazing cover if you'd been traditionally published, but I know you got to have a lot more say in your cover than.
I did. I had several different choices, and I got to talk, fonts and everything. The interior too. The interior design I didn't know was a whole thing. Like I learned a lot about the publishing industry.
Yeah.
And whether or not to include book club questions, whether or not, what should your acknowledgements be like, and there's just
so
a
much.
lot of decisions to make.
A lot of decisions, and you did it all, and it's out in the world. So congratulations.
Thank you, Cami.
I have a couple of questions here. One's from Mary Lou Haberman. And she asks, did you and David do any end of life planning before the accident? That's a great question. No, you were like.
Well, we were 34 and 35, or 35 and 36. We knew better, but I'm sorry. No, the accident happened when we were in our 40s and we got married. No, we talked about getting a will. So, lesson. There's a scene in the book where I didn't have any of his. He took care of all our financial stuff because he was really good at it, and I wasn't, and he enjoyed it, and I didn't have any of our passwords, and I'm calling these places, insurance companies and stuff, and I'm like, my husband was in a plane crash and he has a brain injury, and they're like, yeah, right, I mean, like it was hard, it was awful. So, yeah. No.
Yeah, that's so there's a lesson in that for all of us, right?
Yeah, I had to hire an attorney right after, because if something happened to me after David's accident, then our house, I needed to make sure the kids were taken care of. Yeah, so I got that done. One of the first things I did after the accident.
I bet. Yeah, I bet. So there's a question here from Dawn Landau. She said, I love your honesty about relevance. Yeah. I do too. And I wanted to back up to say something about that as well, which is that, my belief is that we craft our identity in relationship with other people. Like, it's not something we do sitting alone. Like, for example, during a pandemic, I mean, a lot of people sort of like, who am I? You know, but but it is something that we do in relationship with other people. We do need an audience and to be seen, a witness for who we are. I don't think that's at all unusual. I just think it might be hard for us to say. So I agree with you, Dawn. The honesty about that and your desire to publish. So often others shoot that down, but I think it's the driving force for a lot of writers. I agree, Dawn. So once you went the hybrid route, were you concerned that your story would not get the recognition you wanted? Oh, like, given that part of the deal, part of the reason to publish it was for the recognition, were you worried that the recognition wouldn't be there? And how much effort did you have to put into the publishing journey?
Yeah, so the answer to that is I'm in process. It's not even been 2 months, and I just wrote a piece, actually, a blog post. I haven't decided where to put it yet, but it's about when you right after you publish a book. There's this. My piece is called Withdrawal because if you and if you're in theater, it's called Second Night Slump, where it's like this big build up to opening night, and then okay, well we saw the show, but it's not as exciting, right? And So yeah, it's I had to hire my own publicist. That was not part of the deal with She Writes. They do support you, like they have you on their website and all of that, but they don't do the marketing or publicity at all. You have to learn how to build your own platform, and it's one of the reasons I got to know Cami is because I took her class in building a platform. You basically are starting a business, and you have to get eyeballs on it, and it's true. That is one of the main reasons to go with a big publisher is that they just have a big publicity machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and it used to be that you'd go on a book tour and all of that, and then I think before the pandemic hit, that was already starting to slow down with that kind of thing. So yeah, it's harder, and there's so much out there. There's so much content. There's so much wanting people eyeballs, and time, and so you just have to put it out, do your best, hope that it gets exposed to people who need it and will appreciate it, and do your best. And
Yeah. And all the more reason to know whose hands you hope it gets into, right? So that, you were very specific. There's women and of course men, anybody's going to get something out of reading it, but women between, 40 and 80, and they're probably facing caregiving of some kind. And once you know that, you know where to look for them a little bit more,
Yeah.
There's places you don't spend your time because they're not likely to be there. Yeah.
Right.
So I don't know if there are any other questions out there, peeps, but if there are, you can pop them in the Q&A. We have probably time for one more. And I see that Claire has opened up the chat again, and she's posted the link for the book, the Village Books link for the book. Wherever you buy the book, I would encourage you to purchase it at a local and independently owned bookstore. We love those. We need them in our world. And we're very, very happy that Village Books, among others, has been able to stay open and stay involved in the community, supporting, like, central to the community. In Village Books' case, I even think one of the owners was like pedaling her bicycle around town delivering books during the pandemic. Isn't that great? So, and Kristen says, and if you download the book, Kobo has it, so you don't have to get it on other places. So, Kobo.
Yes. And I buy the book at Village Books, but I did record an audiobook. It's my voice.
Nice.
That's the way you need to listen to your books. And that was a big question among the authors in She Writes Press, because we have our own little cohorts and Facebook groups. And should you do an audiobook, and I think the answer is pretty much if you can afford to. It's just another way to reach people who wouldn't normally be able to sit down, but they like to listen when they're on their walks or on their drives or whatever.
Yep. Amen. And if you're not a really great reader, an out loud reader, you can hire someone to do it, but you are. I mean, you even did the German voices, so nicely done. Well, this has been really fun, Rachel, to talk and, you know, let the conversation flow. And I'm gonna invite Claire back. There you are. How are you, Claire?
Oh gosh, I've been just sitting here enjoying myself listening to this. So Rachel, the audiobook, is it available on Libro or is it just Audible or?
It's Audible.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Something to look into is a lot of people, yeah, if you can get it on Libro FM, Libro is the audio book source for people who want to support independent bookstores. It's the one that we partner with. So I highly encourage, and lots of people use it. So if it's already on Libro, that's great. If it's not, I hope it will be.
Yeah,
So,
I will check with my audiobook producer. Yes, definitely, because
okay.
we want that. And I've been directing people to bookshop.org at the very least. So, yeah.
Great. Well, I have to echo what people have said in the Q&A and what Cami said, and I really appreciate your honesty with your book and with what you've shared. And I will say that you certainly hit some personal chords with me this evening that I really appreciated. So so thank you for that.
Yeah, really meaningful conversation. And Don posted a couple of other questions just about the age of your kids. And so Rachel's kids are in their 20s now, and they do know about the book. And
my daughter is not ready to read it. She's very sensitive, and but my son loved it and made some corrections.
Oh,
Mom, you got that wrong.
Yeah. Thank you. And thanks for, as always, Claire, for hosting, and Rachel for inviting me to join you on this journey.
Thank you for being here, Cami.
And hopefully when you're back up this way, I don't know, is there another book in the works?
Thinking about it.
Okay.
Maybe. So I'm thinking historical fiction this time, I think. And I love historical fiction, so.
Yeah.
Dawn, yes, I will hold a signed copy for you. I will write that down now.
Write that down right now, because if you don't, it'll go straight.
I can go in and sign some more if you need them. Although I don't know if you have more than, I think I signed about 8 of them, and 3 of them are already reserved.
Well, and then I have this one that I absconded for this event, and it's not signed. So I don't know. How much longer are you around?
Till Thursday morning.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. I will be in touch. All right. Well, gosh, is there anything you have? Any closing comments?
I love you, independent bookstores, so much. And I was in Village today, and it just felt so good to be there. And so thank you for the work that you do in bringing great literature and great writing to people. And Cami, thank you for your supporting we writers. And I know you are one, so you know. Yeah, just big hugs to both of you and all out there in the ether.
Yep, likewise. Thank you.
Agreed. And Cami, gosh, you're just getting so dang good at this whole interlocutor role that you've become like our regular. It's great.
Who knew we need a TV show? Come on.
Exactly. Oh gosh. Well, thank you both. I think that's probably a good spot on which to end. So thank everyone for coming this evening. This event will be recorded. It is being recorded. It's going to be on our YouTube channel. So, and I will email everybody who registered. For those who couldn't attend live, they will get the recording. So, all right. So everybody enjoy the rest of your evening and stay well. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.